You're stealing from their time. You should allow them to hang out with people they enjoy. But you are sitting here pretending like you do, being totally inauthentic, and robbing a portion of their life as well. Stop doing that.
Hello, and welcome to the Rise Again podcast. My name is Dr. Peter Risenen, and I'm your host here at the Rise Again podcast. Now, we're on to season 2, and the thing about season 2 that's going to differentiate it from season 1 are the things that I've gone through in my life since we were doing season 1. We have recently fostered and adopted a newborn. I killed my first bull elk with my bow and arrow last fall, and I've gotten into fly fishing, as well as am now the medical director of a men's health and testosterone replacement business. This has all been majorly life-changing for me, and I'm super excited to share some of the journey with you guys through the Rise Again podcast. So I hope you guys get something out of this. If you guys love it, please rate it and review it, share it with your friends. Let's get the stuff out there. We're going to share some amazing guests, and I hope you guys really enjoy season 2 of the Rise Again podcast. Welcome back to the 70th episode of the Rise Again podcast. Today, I sit down with such a great friend of mine. His name is Jackson Martin. And Jack and I talk about quite a few different things on the podcast, but the things that really stand out to me from this episode are going to be talking about relationships and transforming those of the relationships around you with active listening. The other things that we're going to talk about are the book that he's writing. We're going to talk about friendships and the quadrants. Everyone in your life falls into a quadrant. What quadrant do they fall into, and what does that mean for that relationship? And we also talk about, things that we've undergone together. It's really, really just a great episode. I hope you guys really enjoy today's episode with Jackson Martin. It's a distinct pleasure to have one of my great friends here in the podcast studio today with me, Jack Martin. I want to tell you guys a little bit about Jack. We got to know each other kind of serendipitously at a men's camp. Quite a few, age has no room in friendships, I feel like. Anyways, we've just become buddies. I mean, hunting, golfing, and just spending time together, quality time, talking about the good things in life and what makes people tick. We're interested in people. Both you and I are just super passionate about people.
For sure. Yeah. Well, it's you threatened that you would be inviting me to your podcast at some point, and here we are. So I'm honored to join you. As Peter has mentioned, we got an interesting friendship that's probably a little unusual, being that we're more than a decade apart in age. I remember working with your dad when you were still in school, and here we are, friendship. Interesting.
It's amazing. Yeah, I actually think a lot of my friends I've always been attracted to spending time with people who are older than myself. And I don't know why, but maybe it's being the oldest. I was always around older people. You think about it, as the first child, you're always around your mom and dad and then their friends and whatever else too. But my wife is, she's 14 years older than myself too. So it's like, maturity is important.
Maybe you're just an old soul, Peter.
I might be. So you were hobbling, just a quick fun aside here. You were hobbling up to the office. What's going on? You were complaining about shin splints.
Oh, yeah. So I got challenged. I'm pushing 50. I got challenged that I couldn't run a mile without stopping. When I got that challenge, I thought, maybe that's accurate, but I'm going to go see. I haven't run a mile in 20, 30 years.
When did you do that last?
When I was in the military, I used to run with the 530 Club. So that was like the top. So I was quite the runner when I was a kid. Many, many years of sitting in a vehicle or in an office chair and no running. So I said, I'm going to try it and see if I can do it. Then the bet was, could you do it in 8 minutes? I said, no way. So I did do it. I did it in 9 minutes. And then I said, I'm going to get to the 8-minute mark. So I kept running, overdid it. Here I am, shin splints.
Well, those are something that you can get rid of. So it'll be good to see you running that 8-minute mile. I mean, you're going to surprise people. So you hit 50 years old and, be really, I would say, starting off the second half of life in some of the best shape of your life too, comparatively, right? So you've done some incredible things recently. I have a few things I actually brought you on, especially outside of our friendship, that I really wanted to bring up, because the more I've gotten to know you, the more intrigued I am about all the amazing perspectives and the things that you bring to the world and to the table of life. One of the things that we've talked about since I've really gotten to know you has been your incredible perspective on marriage, how that's morphed for you. And why don't you give us kind of a little bit of a background of, bring us back to where, you felt like your marriage was and where it is now and what's been the catalyst for that. because you're writing a book. I feel like all this is a part of what you're working on there. So why don't you tell us a bit about that?
The opportunity for me to become passionate about having a great marriage began with screwing it all up. I married the love of my life. I married my soulmate. Today, I know that for sure. When I got married, my perspective was different. I thought I was God's gift to the gals, yeah. And I get to choose whoever I want. And since I chose you, you should feel lucky. Like that was the cocky, arrogant perspective of a 23-year-old guy. Straight out of the military, best shape of my life. I thought I was somebody special. Fast forward, that kind of perspective doesn't work well in a marriage. Luckily, my wife was patient. She must have loved me more than any woman could love a man, because she should have left me. I think I would have, given the way I behaved. So that began the journey of personal development and discovery that's just been a 25-year journey. But if you fast forward to, my challenge to write the book, we began what we call a marriage retreat about probably 4 years ago is when we first started doing that. It's interesting that, that pursuit of personal time offsite, away from the children and the day-to-day, and the things that we've discovered that are really powerful in the marriage. I wouldn't recognize our marriage for what it is today if you were to compare it to what it was then. And there's some really interesting things that have taken place. I've known this gal, been married to Andrea for 25 years. I've learned more about who she really is as a person in the last 3 years than I did in the first 22 years because of what we've been doing here.
That's so profound. You thought you knew her, and here you are, and now you're like, oh my goodness, I really know who you are.
I owe a little bit of that credit to you and some others. Learning how to really listen has impacted my relationship with her and my relationship with my children. And of course, all of my clients and customers and business relationships, everybody in my life has been impacted by really understanding what listening is and how to do it in an active way instead of just having your mouth shut. It's not necessarily listening. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And I want to pass that credit on to my counseling teachers back in medical school. I mean, that was probably the most profound class for me because it was where I really had meltdowns in the evening, really thinking about connecting with people, where I had judged people. Yeah, I would lay in bed sometimes at night and I would just cry thinking about how I had lived a life that I wouldn't have wanted to live had I had been able to have chosen it. And in many ways. And so that perspective really catalyzed a lot of things. I mean, there was perspectives I had that changed right in medical school, sitting down with people that I normally would have never sat down with. Actually, on this real quick tangent, because the really neat thing that I experienced was something, I was at Bastyr University in the medical school program, naturopathic medical school, and it was called, I was invited to this thing called the Human Library. And they had these people, they said, this will be an incredible event and you will never experience anything like this outside of this. And I was like, okay, cool. Well, I'll show up. I'm a part of it. And I showed up and they give you these tag, everyone who came, maybe like 50 people or 100 people came, and they had all of these people from different walks of life. They had one guy who was a Muslim. The people who I visited with, one guy was a Muslim and his title was, "My name is Ahmed and I'm not a terrorist." One lady was 600 pounds. And so the visit with her was about, health at every size. These perspectives from different people. One was sexually abused as a young girl. And we got to ask these people deep questions and listen to them. Questions that you would never ask somebody. We were able to ask these people. And they said, you know what? You can ask me everything. Nothing's off the table. And I'm here to help educate you so that you have a different perspective going forward with people that you wouldn't have had prior. That really catalyzed a huge change for me because I really started to I really wanted to understand who people were. And the only way you can do that is through active listening. And so here we are, and we're talking about active listening. It sounds like it's changed your life too.
Well, it's really interesting that part of that journey, I remember when you introduced that book to me, and it was really a business book. And it made a lot of sense to read from a perspective of negotiations in business. And that when people, I think the underlying message of that book was when people feel understood, then they're ready to pay attention to you and try to understand your position. And inside of that dynamic where both parties understand each other, then a common goal can be aimed at and achieved, right? So that's the general premise of the book. Great book, really thoughtful consideration. That guy was a hostage negotiator for the FBI. What was the name of that book?
I can't remember.
I think it was called Split the Difference. Never split the difference. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
Great read for those people, particularly people in business, but also people not in business. You read the first half of that book, it's nothing about business. It's about giving people the thing that they're seeking more than anything else, which is they just want to be understood. So the timing of that was really interesting or fortuitous for me because of what I was dealing with my oldest daughter. Adopted child, had this fierce determination to be accepted. That's kind of a natural thing with adoptive children. And you know this, you have an adopted child of your own. But when they get to that age where they're trying to be themselves and they want to be accepted, they're starving for that desire to have people understand them. So here I am as a father, having grown up in a culture that I'm the dad, I make the rules, this is my house, you'll do this until you move out. And she going down a path that was not congruent with those rules, right? And me being the disciplinarian and the military background and just kind of focusing on trying to control her path so that she doesn't crash into the rocks, so to speak. And what ended up culminating out of that was our relationship became worse and worse to the degree where it became toxic. She didn't want to talk to me. She didn't want to see me. She didn't want to listen to me. Essentially, everything that came out of my mouth to her was another version of a new rule or a lecture of some type, right? She was sick of it. So I think part of her dramatic departure from the way that we raised her was probably in defiance or proving to me that I'm an individual and I'll do what I want, right? So I'm sure part of it was that. I know there was peer pressure and all this other things that were going on there too. But it got so toxic where as a father, I started to feel like I had messed that all up too. So in the same way that I felt when I felt like I messed up my marriage, here I messed up my opportunity to raise this child. What I discovered in this, and it was so profound for me, this was like a light switch. I mean, you take a child that's doing everything that a father would hope they wouldn't do, flip the switch and have an amazing relationship where your child shares everything they're struggling with and turns their life around to where they're full-time job, making car payments, saving money, excited about life, good job, all that stuff, right? In the same way that I saw my marriage completely change, we see that girl's life completely changed. You wouldn't recognize her in the life that she lives today if you were to compare it to then. But that occurred through listening. And in the beginning, it was, she didn't trust me.
How could she, right?
Yeah, because she thought it was going to be another version of Dad's lectures. Shania, come sit down, please. This time, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to say a word. She didn't trust me. Okay, but then I did. I didn't say a word. I just gave her a hug and did what fathers are supposed to do, unconditional love. Then the next time, hey, Shania, you want to share anything? You don't want to sit down? So we sit down, and this time I ask her, do you want any help with that? No, Dad, I just need you to keep doing what you're doing. I didn't turn her life around. I stopped getting in the way. I let go. And I did that through listening.
That's so beautiful. She's such a remarkable young lady, and I've had the privilege to get to know her a little bit. Amazing how when we don't get in the way of other people's growth, you actually just gave her what she wanted the most. She wanted to be known as the beautiful individual that she is.
Yeah. And even today, like she moved away, she calls me. Sometimes it's just to catch up, which is really neat. But sometimes she's struggling with something. It might be mechanical. Hey, Dad, got a broken window. How do I solve this, right? But sometimes it's like, Dad, I got this conflict in my life and I just want to share it with you. And we get all done sharing and I listen and I ask questions and I really, really deeply understand what she's dealing with. And sometimes that's all she needed. She needed somebody to understand her. I don't need to fix it. She just needed to work through it and that solution kind of shows up on its own. So it's been an incredible thing. It's not a normal thing. Parents think that they know what's best for their children. And same thing in a marriage. Each of us has our own perspective and we think we know what's best, right? But what you're missing out on is living your life with somebody and enjoying who they really are when we try to control them. So I think that listening with the intent to understand somebody allows you to let go. You don't need to control anything. Just enjoy who they are.
Why don't you tell us a bit about how this has now transformed and the part this plays in the marriage retreat and what the book's going to be about?
Over 4 years of doing this, well, first of all, let me back up a little bit and share a little context because this kind of starts from what I do as a business. I'm in the investment real estate space. I'm in the most unusual to most people's view real estate space because we invest in mobile home parks. There's a reason for that. And we don't need to get into that here, but we have a lot of investor clients that are investing, particularly in today's environment with high inflation and all this uncertainty. They're looking for a place to park their capital where it's not exposed to the risk it is everywhere else. And it's a stable cash flow generator through whatever uncertain times we have ahead. Listening has had an amazing impact on the business side of things as well. But there's a practice or an architecture that we use in our business, and it's called EOS. It stands for the Entrepreneur Operating System. And essentially, it's a goal-based or goal-oriented business architecture where you set 10-year goals, you set 3-year targets, you set 1-year rocks, and then you break that up into smaller, bite-sized quarterly goals that you tackle. So you take a bite out of the apple every year, and you're constantly moving the needle towards the goal that you have in the business, right? And then we have weekly meetings. Those weekly meetings are making sure that we're on track. And if anything is broken, let's fix it. And, you get to solve all the issues that come up over the course of time. And you just kind of keep everybody on the same page, moving in the same direction. So when I saw the impact that had made in a business, I've been in businesses prior to this without that kind of architecture. And now being in a business with that architecture, it was dramatic to see the results that just adding that architecture, the impact that it had. I thought, why am I not doing this at home? This is kind of the genesis of the whole marriage retreat, right? So I shared the idea with my wife, and she's like, yeah, we try it. That's cool, right? A little more nonchalant, like, whatever, honey, you always want to try some new thing. Like, this is the old Jack trying to control everything and not listen, right? The irony in all of this is that the marriage really came out of something that was not intended. One of the things I discovered is you cannot run a marriage like a business. It just doesn't work. Businesses are about results. They're about numbers. They're about economic goals and about success and progress and that kind of thing. Marriages are about feelings. If you think about a simple context for marriage, I married you because I admire you. And I want to continue to admire you my entire life, or our entire marriage. I want to be in full support of you becoming the best version of you that you are supposed to become. And I'd like the same in return. And in this way, we enjoy our journey together. But neither of us are living the other person's life. We're sharing our lives with each other. Like, that's the marriage, right? When one person is running or controlling the direction of the marriage, that's not happening. You both lose. So anyway, we started this, the intention of being more structured weekly meetings where we talk about our marriage, we talk about our family, we talk about our children and, our home and all the things that are in our life. And even though some of those things are still part of our marriage retreat, what it's become is really deeply understanding each other and getting down to the root of what's holding us back from becoming who we really want to be, and then being in support of each other and then enjoying each other. Like, that's what it's become. So ironically, I took this business piece and brought it to this marriage, and then it's morphed into something that's so different that I've been challenged by those people who I've shared it with to write a book about it. So that's essentially what the book is going to be about.
Every time I've heard about the marriage retreats that you've been on, it's been very inspiring to me. And yeah, I'm really excited for being able to join in on one of these marriage retreats, at us as a couple, joining you guys and the other couples who are on this. Why don't you share some of the experiences that either you or Andrea has had on some of these marriage retreats, or some breakthroughs that you've had?
Yeah, the one that stands out the most, and this is similar to what I experienced with my daughter, went on our first marriage retreat. This is why we went on more. It was a little bit combative. There was some, I'm trying to make it business-like. It didn't work, right?
Maybe a little controlling.
Yeah. And it was like, she kind of felt like she didn't have freedom. So I'm just like, hey, you got to answer this and you got to share this. And this is how we do it, right? So it was more regiment as a business. But right out of the gate, it started to become obvious that it wasn't going to work like a business would. Businesses require accountability. Even if you don't want to do it, you do it. Like, somebody has to be accountable. Marriages, there's a degree of accountability that I think is important, right? But everything is not about accountability. We're humans. Sometimes there's a need for love and acceptance and humility. It's just different. The dynamic is so different. I hadn't listened to her during the first 2 days of the retreat. It's a 2-day event. And we're heading home. It occurred to me, maybe I should try this listening thing. And this is shortly after I had read that book. So I said, I'm going to try this and just see what happens. So I asked her a question, and then she was over there contemplating. I don't know what was really going on, but she told me later that what was really going on is, I'm not even going to answer this because I know he's trying to get at something else. There's another follow-up question here, probably going to try to pin me into a corner. I don't want to be pinned. I didn't say anything, just waited. Then I asked the same question in a little bit more softer manner, or maybe just a little bit more descriptive. And then she shared a little bit. And I used the tip in the book, which essentially said, this is the active part of listening. Tell me more. Or how did that feel? And then she expanded on it a little bit. I was like, wow, this is different. And then I asked her another question. just on the same topic, but just to keep her, she's peeling open the onion here. She's never peeled it open because she's afraid that it will just be rejected. I'll have an opinion about it. I'll disagree with her. It's just classic relationship stuff.
Yeah, I mean, being vulnerable,
Yeah.
it exposes yourself, right?
When I get vulnerable, I get hurt. That's what she's feeling, right? So she shares with me later that that's what she was dealing with. But all the way down the hill, it was like an 1.5-hour drive. I asked questions, she shared. I didn't give my opinion. I didn't, this is what the book instructed, right? I get home. She's like, honey, this is so good. We should turn around and go back. I was like, well, this is a great lesson that we've just learned here. Let's pick this up on our next marriage retreat. That's where listening became such a huge part of the marriage retreat. But it's something that you actually have to practice. So one of my quarterly goals was to practice active listening. Actually, one of my first annual goals was to become a good active listener. But the quarterly goal or the weekly metric was practice active listening with your wife and with one child for 20 minutes once a week. Like these are kind of silly. Like those are the KPIs that come out of this marriage retreat. Really simple things, but I've gotten to know my children. I think that we've been able to create an environment where they're free to share, even if they screw up. Like it's okay.
That's what every parent wishes that they had, that environment where the kids can share even when they screw up and they aren't going to feel like they're going to be scathed for it, right? Or punished, it could be even metaphorically speaking for their issues that, the problems that they've made. But where else would you want a space like that where kids can feel safe?
Yeah, for sure. And they start that at an age that's young enough to where, seems to me like children are kind of done you're done parenting when they're about 13-ish. Doesn't mean that you have no role as a parent, but now they're starting to practice to be an adult. They're trying to be an individual. They should have this safe environment for about 5 years to practice their adulting until they move out. Like that's what they should have, right? But the natural inclination of parents that we know best and we try to tell them what to do, it just closes them out. Like here's another lecture. Here's another rule. Like I'm so tired of this. Discipline has its place, right? So I have another story to share with you. It's really interesting. Got a 13-year-old boy. One day I catch him with one of those little vape things, those flavored vape things, right? And he sees me catch him with it. And he's immediately embarrassed. He tries to hide it. So I walked down. Well, first of all, I paused for a little bit and I stood there thinking, okay, who am I as a father? I know how I would have reacted a year ago, which is take that thing away and break it to prove to him that that's not acceptable. But who am I today? And what action am I going to take right here that will impact this child and our relationship for the next 5 years because he's 13? So I go down there and say, hey, buddy, what do you got? And he's like, what? And you could see he was shaking, like he was fearful. I could just totally see that he knew he was busted, right? I said, well, just show me what you got, buddy. You're not in trouble. It's okay. Let me see it. He shows it to me and I was like, you think that you should be using that? He didn't even answer. He was so afraid. He knew he was in deep trouble, or at least he assumed that he was. I said, where'd you get that from? Oh, I found it. I said, hey, buddy. I said, come here. Gave him a little hug. When I was a little boy, I was afraid of getting in trouble. I remember being right where you are. My dad caught me with something I shouldn't have had. I remember the first impulse was make something up so that nobody else gets in trouble. I said, but nobody's in trouble here, buddy. It's a different dad. Like you're not in trouble. You're not going to get disciplined. You're not going to get in trouble. Like I just want you to know, come here, buddy. I love you. Give him a big hug, right? So let's start over. Let me give you a chance to tell the truth. Where'd you get that from? So he said the name of one of the guys that they hang out with, It doesn't matter. It's inconsequential. The point of it was he finally felt the freedom to share the truth. We inspire our children to lie to us because they're afraid of getting in trouble.
It's true. When you rule your house with the authoritarian approach, it's really tough. And what I learned recently is that when you're only ruled by the authoritarian approach, at some point the kid's big enough and powerful enough and whatever that they're going to go, and once the dad or whoever is not bigger than them and not more, that's the only thing that's keeping them down and keeping them in line, right? Or seemingly in line. Once that's done and they're bigger or whatever, they're going to go do whatever they want, because that was the only thing that really was holding them down in a way, was the authoritarian approach. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't teach any long-term. It's just like, now I'm big enough, I can go do my own thing.
Yeah, and I think there's a rubber band effect there. So like you suppress them so long, that rubber band gets stretched. And then when they finally have that freedom and the rubber band lets go, then they go way down the wrong path, or at least the potential is there.
They didn't even know you didn't know who they were, and they didn't even know they weren't allowed to express their authentic, true who they were, right? Their
or
individuality.
Discover. Yeah. So like in this environment should be safe for them to discover and practice and make mistakes and trip and fall. So what's really interesting in the outcome of that story, so I asked him, do you think that you should be in trouble for this? And he looked at me and shook his head like, of course, And I said, well, hey, here, this is going to be different this time. I just want you to know that your dad views parenting different. Now, this is obviously credit to Shania. She helped me recognize that children make mistakes. I do too. I'm a father. I've been screwing things up for 20 years as a parent too, right? You have an opportunity to make mistakes here. It's okay. So if you feel like there's some punishment, well, then we can work that out and what's appropriate. But here's what I suggest we do. I'm not going to take this thing away from you. You're going to throw it away if you feel like it's appropriate. But first, I want you tomorrow, as part of your school, to go research the health impacts of vape pens. And I want you to spend an hour on it and then write a little report and then bring that back to me. So he did. The next day, he shows up and he said, well, here's what I discovered. And he talked about the heavy metals and like what it does to your lungs and all this stuff. And I said, well, do you want to do that to yourself? No. I said, well, why were you doing it? That's cool. All the other dudes do it, but none of them have done the research. So what transpired here is something dramatically different than what would have had I taken it away and smashed it and said, you can't have these. A week later, he would have had one. He just never would have got caught again. And he still would be out there doing this. But in this fashion, two things occurred. One, he able to do the research on his own. That was not a lecture from Dad.
So he learned.
He taught me something. So I didn't even know about that, right? And he chose to get rid of that thing himself. So he made a good choice, right, on his own. And now he has this thing in our relationship called trust.
That's amazing. I once, what was it? Similar situation. I probably learned more from the situation. It was kind of similar to that. My dad, I told him a lie. Instead of getting a brutal punishment of any sort, which we never really got brutal punishments. But and there was an age too where I was like 12 or 13. He goes, you know what? Of course, I'm never going to touch you in any way. There's no spanking. There's none of that stuff. Corporal punishment. I had it a couple times when I was younger, and then it was just done because Dad just felt so bad, and I think appropriately so. And what ended up happening was, I got to an age and I lied to him, and he said, trying to cover up, right, for my friends and everything else. And he said, well, I want you to write me like a 5-page paper on lying. And you can use whatever resources you want. You can use the Bible, you can use the dictionary, I want you to exhaust different resources on that, but I want you to bring me a paper on lying. And that was one of the most probably profound learning times that I had, because, like when you'd go and sit in your room, like if someone, a parent would say, well, I want you to go think about that for a little bit. And and then we can talk about it. I'll come in about a half hour, but I want you to just go think about what just transpired there. Incredible learning, because you're thinking, and you've already convicted yourself, like your boy, he knew that he wasn't doing the right thing, or he should probably, there's a flavor of it that's not right. And you know that when you do something that's wrong. And so thinking about it and having time to meditate on it and work on it and then present that to the parent reads that or whatever. But there was kind of a bond that was built there in that. And honestly learned out of that. Lying to Dad was never an option again. It was a great learning experience. So I really admire what you did with him there with that, and even doing a little report similarly that we had. But that was great.
Well, when you've had an experience of a toxic relationship with a teenager like I did, you certainly want to do whatever you can to avoid having that experience again. So there's powerful lessons that come from this. When you look back at your life, and you could think of dozens of times in your life, it seems like the greatest lessons come out of the greatest difficulty, or those times when things are the worst. So when you feel like the worst failure and you've screwed it up, get excited, because that's about when the greatest lesson is going to show up in your life. That's happened to me several times. It's happened in business. It's happened in marriage. It's happened in parenting. It's even happened in friendships. It's almost like you should hope for difficulty in your life, because that's when you'll become a better version of who you are.
Pray for trials, as the Bible speaks about. And I shared with you, I did share on a previous podcast, but before my traumatic brain injury when I was 25, that week before, I remember actually praying for trials because everything in my life was going way too easy. And I remember hearing that in a sermon, that we should also pray for trials, not just life to be easy and the road to be open before us, and that our faith would be strengthened. I remember praying that week because I was publishing a paper. It was getting published in a surgical journal. I had straight A's in college. I was a teaching assistant. I was even being paid to be at the college, in a certain way. And There was a lot of things that I just felt like I had a job that was good, that I loved. I was shadowing surgeons. Like I had all this stuff going for me, everything. And I was like, I need to pray for some trials in my life too, because I don't want to feel like I'm running the show. I had the traumatic brain injury, 6 month setback. And you know what? I was okay with it all. I was ready for it. But I think when we pray for trials, like you said, our greatest learning comes, out of that learning, obviously biking across the country and then learning about who I was. I had a lot of time to reflect on that. And here I am doing something that's totally different than operating in a surgical theater, 80 hours a week. Like I live a different life and I am so thankful that I'm doing what I'm doing. But that only came out of difficulty.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, I never understood the whole be grateful for trials. I never understood that. Be thankful and grateful. It's like, why would you be grateful for something that's not fun? But today, looking back on it, you don't ever get to, we think in terms of, we're all here, we're all unique. We all have our own special gifts, and there's some purpose that we're here to serve, particularly to our fellow man or mankind, right? In order for you to become that person that you're supposed to be so that you could be in the pursuit of serving that purpose, you're going to be led to difficulty. That's how we grow. So in the same way that the child learns, he stands up and then he falls. And then he stands up and he falls. And pretty soon he learns to walk, right? That process is taking place our whole life. When you got the traumatic brain injury, it's like that's when you fell down. You need to get up and learn how to walk again, right? So it's really interesting to think of what that path of your life may have been without that and how dramatic your life had changed and became what it is today.
Best thing that ever happened in my life, really. That and my wife, meeting her, those two things, and they came out of the biggest trials that I can ever have, that I could have ever wished for in my life up till now. 36 years old. I'm looking forward on a lot of great years ahead, God willing. But, I also do pray for trials as well, that I could have new outlooks on life and be given the faith that I need to move forward and to also discover more about myself. When things are easy, how much introspection do we have, right? We don't really look at how things are going or how things could be better. It took a trial with your marriage and some difficulties, or the trial with your daughter, to really realize, like, man, I want to do things differently. Who am I? Who do I want to be? Like, who am I right now? Okay, I need to show up differently in my life. I want myself to show up differently. I want to be, this isn't actually who I want to be.
That's actually it brings up a little pivot. Like, am I being who authentically I really want to be, or how I feel that I'm supposed to be? Almost like if I wake up every day and I give myself a choice that am I going to be led today or allow myself to be led today, or am I going to try to do things myself? And that version of me that I become through allowing myself to be led, that's the authentic version of me, right? So am I doing that? Am I forcing my way through life and just, bull in a china shop? Or am I just being who everybody else wants me to be? What are we choosing? For me, wish that transition would have taken place at a younger age, but super grateful that I've been able to experience that even, before I hit 50. Got another whole half of life to live.
I know. Well, I think a lot of people never figure it out. I've talked to people who are older, and some of the regrets they have in life are similar to those. So I think that whenever we pick it up, it's never too late. You're talking about being authentic and choosing. One of the things that we brought up, you said that your business partner, Nate, and his wife, Jamie, who's a therapist, brought up to you. You brought up on one of the golf outings that we had, a Sunday morning golf outing that we were doing, and we were just really spending time together more than anything else, enjoying some golf at the same time.
Yep.
And you brought up something to me that was pretty profound. Why don't you share that with the audience? Because that, I think, really would resonate with people.
You're talking about the quadrants. Yeah. So this is something that I'll give full credit to my business partner and his wife, Jamie. And essentially, if you can imagine that there's 4 quadrants of people in your life. Quadrant 1 is those people who, if you look at it from a perspective of married couples, right? So both me and my wife get along with and admire the husband and wife in the other relationship. And not only that, our children get along with each other too. So they're friendly. Sometimes you'll see that in families, but those relationships are really rare. So when you find somebody where I would be happy to visit with the husband as much as I would visit with the wife and vice versa, and our kids get along, you should be spending the most time with those people, particularly if you're bringing your kids along. Quadrant number 2 is the same relationship between the couples, but your kids don't get along, or maybe they don't have kids, or maybe their kids are a different age or whatever that is, right? But you really enjoy hanging out with each other. Quadrant 3 is you and I are buddies. Let's say our wives don't know each other, or they don't have a relationship, or maybe they don't jive. Oftentimes we'll find ourselves like, hey, honey, come with. We're going to visit Peter and Catherine. And she's, I know they like each other. So this is a bad example, but we'll use this as an example. She's like, well, I don't like Peter. I don't even know him. I don't like Catherine. I don't even know. Why do I got to come? Right? So in those kind of relationships, you should just go hang out and play a game of golf with your buddy. And the same goes for her. She's got her sisters or her friends and she wants me to come along. Well, I don't know them or jive with them. Why are you dragging me along? Right? So Quadrant 3 are friends of yours, and you should just spend time with them. And your wife and their friends should just go to the spa or to go to lunch or whatever they do. And then Quadrant 4 is everybody else. So these are people that sometimes this is family. Sometimes these are people that you grew up with. They could be part of a community that you grew up in or whatever it is. And there's this obligation or this expectation that you need to hang out with them, even though you don't have any common interests. The real you doesn't come out there. Like you feel like you're just not in among your people, right? Or you're just, there's nothing there. It's almost like you're donating a portion of your life to that time that you spend with them completely out of obligation. So what's really interesting is that Nate and Jamie, that's my business partner's wife, started to live their life that way. And now they found this freedom of being able to choose where they allocate their life. We only get one crack at this thing called life. We don't get to do it over again, right? So where are you going to spend your time? And it starts to expose a couple of things. The first of which is the most precious commodity that we have is time. Spend it with people you enjoy. And you'll find that you'll attract others that you enjoy. And then the other thing that it exposes is this recognition is, why am I hanging out with them? Like, what's the point here? Like, you're actually doing somebody a disservice by hanging out with them if you don't really enjoy their company. You're stealing from their time. You should allow them to hang out with people they enjoy. But you are sitting here pretending like you do, being totally inauthentic, and robbing a portion of their life as well. Stop doing that.
That's incredibly profound. In my life, I've made some different decisions in my life since we talked about that, because I thought about that, and some people who've, maybe there's been something that's come up and it's like, hey, we should do something with so-and-so, or somebody wants to do, or you think about someone and you are, in a location somewhere and you're like, oh, they live around here or whatever, maybe some old social contacts, whatever. And it's kind of like, oh, well, you know what? Like, I don't actually really, it doesn't strike me as something that I would enjoy at all. So what would I choose in this situation and make a different choice on that one? It's a different way to live life. I think if we all took that perspective that you just shared with us and really looked through the lens that way, really there would be a lot of learning and a huge transformation. Because commodities in my life, I think of time and I think of quality relationships. People are my passion and they are for you as well. And it's like, if that's the case, then let's fill our lives up with these people who allow us to share our passions and be authentic with them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a bunch to unpack there. It's quality relationships require time. So if you're sprinkling your time, evenly among everybody, you're not really building any quality relationships. Those are the things that are of the most value when you get to the end of this journey. Who did I get to share my journey with, right? It seems a little selfish at first to say, you know what, I'm going to allocate my time to the people that I enjoy. But when you start to understand that it's robbing from somebody else who you don't enjoy of their life, then it becomes like more of a gift. Like, why am I stealing their time? I'm going to give them that back. Obviously, I think that it's important to recognize that there are times when maybe your presence is not for you, it's for them. So there's times, and that's like when you're doing some kind of charitable thing, or you're speaking at an event, or whatever it is, you've been asked to serve in some capacity. Obviously, those are different, right? Going to family events and going to meaningful things around celebrating holidays are bigger than you. And let's not get clouded and become selfish in that respect, right? So you have to be a little judicious in the context of this conversation, because there are times when service is good and contributing is good, and showing up and just lighting the room with your presence. We're all different and all unique, and the families are what they are. God created them that way because everybody's is an ingredient in the family, right? This is not to be taken as like a hard and fast thing. Like, I don't like that brother, so I'm not hanging out with the family ever.
Right.
Like, you
take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, you got to be a little intelligent about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a good way of looking at it. You've done a lot of interesting things, and I really appreciate you're a man of variety. You've really expanded your viewpoint on a lot of these things that you've talked about. And I'm always intrigued spending time with people who open their minds up, right? Like the old kind of fun little adages like, a mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was at a conference and the doctor was like, a mind, he said that. And then he goes, but not so open that your brains fall out. I was kind of laughing about that because, that really, I've only heard that, be open-minded about it. But
well, the other thing that's kind of interesting is a parachute doesn't work unless you're moving.
That's true. Ooh.
Yes, if you're just sitting there, you might want to just keep your parachute in the pack. If you're in the cul-de-sac of life and you're doing nothing, maybe you don't got much that you should be sharing.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. This is great. Yeah. Jack, you have a really unique and fun perspective on life. I've learned a lot from you. You give me a lot of credit, but I want to give you plenty of credit on this because I've learned a lot from you on this, and I appreciate our friendship so much. Like you said, you've got a lot going on. You've been working on this book now. The work stuff has just been your career, and I would say your chosen path is just incredible. You love helping people, and this is just definitely the vehicle to help people. That's something that I see is like you're kind of alive with this career path. Like it gets you excited, and that's really fun.
Yeah, it's interesting that, by day, by career, I'm in investment real estate. We're essentially buying broken real estate and turning it around, repairing it and making it be optimal efficiency and performance. And of course, our investors get to participate in that. Inside of that, I am a person that enjoys relationships and appreciates that part of the business more than anything else. So to the degree that I create success, like how would I view success in my role in our business? It's that all of our relationships across the entire business, down to the tenants at every single one of the properties we own, the investors who are receiving the benefit from our work, the contractors we work with, the employees that work with us and for us, the partnership and how Nate and I interact. All of that, the success that I would see is that we have an amazing relationship. It's like best experience for me means everybody has a great relationship. That doesn't mean everything's always going to go right, but that means when it doesn't go right, you communicate. You share what's going wrong and how we are looking to solve it, right? When it's going right, you celebrate. When it's going wrong, you communicate. You just never stop communicating. Like I think that's the open, honest environment where you can listen and be authentic and all of that. No politics, no games. That's what makes it work. So interesting that outside of business, that the passion is still the same. It's people, it's relationships. And to me, the most important relationship that we'll have as we live here is within our marriage. I've screwed it up. I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, I almost screwed it up so bad she was going to leave me. And here I am today with the opposite experience. I screwed up fatherhood, almost to the point where that relationship was going to end in a toxic manner. She tried to commit suicide. And today we have, in my view, the relationship that every parent would want to have with her child. Open, honest. She struggles with something. Who does she call first? Her parents. We don't solve it for her. 90% of the time, there's nothing to solve. So I think that those lessons and that experience has inspired me to write this book. So when it comes out, I'll share it with you.
We'll definitely share that with the audience, and I'll let everybody know. But I can't thank you enough, Jack. I think we've done it. I think we've really unpacked a lot here, and I thank you for your time and coming and spending this time with me today. It's really a treasure.
Peter, I'm honored to have you as a friend. I knew this day would come. So thanks for the invite. Thanks for allowing it to be open and just free.
You're welcome. Beautifully done. Wasn't that a great episode? I hope you guys really enjoyed today's episode with Jack Martin. If you guys are looking forward to getting in touch with him, let me put his contact information for you in the show notes. When that book comes out, you guys will hear all about it. The Marriage Retreat is going to be something that's just phenomenal and something that I would recommend to every couple out there to strengthen your relationship. There's nothing better than those relationships around us. And what is more powerful to us than having great relationships in the time that we have left? So that's really critical. If you guys are looking to talk to Jack about investing or any of that stuff, of course, his contact information's there. They're just in a phenomenal business. They're not even advertising or looking for more clients because it's so successful. But if it's something that you're interested in and you want to see if you would even be a good fit for their business, you can reach out to him through that as well. So I hope you guys really enjoyed today's episode with Jack Martin, and maybe you took something from it for yourself. I mean, with all these episodes, there's something usually in it for each and every one of us. I learn things as I sit down with these guests. I hope you guys are practicing good listening and maybe taking something away from it for yourself. So I hope you guys enjoy a great day, great weekend, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Rise Again podcast. Hey, thanks for listening to the Rise Again podcast. Great episode, hey? You know what? I really love interviewing people and I love getting people on who have things to share with the world. So if you have a really cool guest that you'd like to get on the podcast, email me and I will do my best to get them on the show. I hope you guys have a phenomenal week and stay tuned for the next episode of the Rise Again podcast.